friend, right?
Absolutely.
James Fox. Hi, James.
Hey, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks so much for letting me come here. And the second time I've been here in studio. Last time, I don't know if you remember, but we had some type of technical issues. I think I got all that stuff behind me.
I think it's other than CNN or National Geographic filming in here, you're the only other person that I've ever done on camera inside my magical zone.
Yeah, and it is magical. This place is just amazing.
Undisclosed location.
Yeah. But anyway, since we just started out like that, I think I'm going to just run a clip right here of this place that I just took I don't know, maybe 10 minutes ago. So here we go. I'm going to run this clip. All right, here I am in the studio with James Fox. We're going to see where it all happens.
Unfortunately, this light isn't on right here because I wanted to show you this is a lovely time I had in Texas on a lake with Hal Puthoff.
Oh, yeah.
This was during production of the first documentary. Well, actually, my second documentary, Out of the Blue. That's Tim Coleman, Boris Zuboff, back in the 90s.
Yeah.
That's one of my appearances on Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
This is just for fun.
Yeah, yeah.
This is my father, who was
cool.
A journalist. This is him probably when he lived in New York, working for Car Driver magazine back in the 60s.
Wow, what a great picture.
Isn't that lovely? Let me turn this light on here. This is the letter I got from Steven Spielberg to Larry King on my movie back in 2009. Ooh. That's really cool. That's my dad and I on a beach together.
Awesome.
Goofing off.
And this is where you edit.
This is where I edit.
That's I've seen
There's
when
the
this
computer. There's all my hard drives. Those are solid state.
Yeah, big bucks.
20 terabytes of solid state, maybe more. Yeah.
Wow.
That disc is normally floating.
I've seen these.
What happened here?
They're
but
pretty funny.
It's just kind of funny, you know? It's just kind of, it's a little silly, but it's fun.
All right.
Anyway.
Well, thank you. And this is the situation room over here.
That's the situation room. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, here we are. So, yeah, thanks again. And I wanted to talk to you about your movie, but other things too, because there's quite a bit going on, lots of changes. A lot has happened.
Can't keep up with it. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. So how's your movie doing?
Doing well. It's only been out 3 weeks. It was at the top of the charts on Docs. I think it's number 2 on Apple and number 3 or something on Amazon. It goes back and forth. You know, we have more promotions coming at the end of the month. We got more coming in February, but it's the most independent released film that I've ever done. Like we don't have, like, normally you'd produce a documentary and you get completion funds and then you get a budget, you sign with a distributor or somebody buys the movie, like I've done with all my previous films, almost all of them. But in this case, we don't even have a distributor. We have somebody more seen as an aggregator. So it's somebody that can take the film and just literally put it on the various platforms like Amazon and Apple and all the other Google Play and Fandango and yada, yada, yada. And then we come up with all the PR money that you need to pay for the trailer and all that stuff. So it's the most independent production that we've ever done. So it's a very grassroots effort.
That's great. And I told you at dinner earlier that I've watched it 3 times and I love it. It's I used to say out of the blue, and I know you have your own, worst critic on your films. Out of the blue, I used to say, long before I ever met you the first time, I told people that was my absolute favorite film is Out of the Blue. And now I just love this one. I mean, I rarely watch anything more than once, and I watched that 3 times. And I just love the way you transition things so smoothly. It shows a maturity or something. Something's changed in your filmmaking, that this was just a real smooth.
I like pacing. As you can see on the board behind me, I generally do like very broad strokes when I set out to, I'm like winging it practically to make a production, and I'm capturing things as I'm learning them, as things are unfolding. I don't like a lot of reality TV shows feel very staged, because they are.
Yeah.
Everything that's happening in my productions are happening. They're unfolding as they unfold, including the last interview that I got, the last possible second with Richard Grieve. he contacted me that I had mispronounced his name. So I said, I promise I won't. Richard Grieve. he's the, we were actually right over here in the edit studio, and it was it was a really key bit of testimony on the 1990 Calvine
Oh,
UFO
yeah.
photograph,
Yeah.
because the photographers and witnesses had vanished for
Right.
34 years. The print had disappeared. And then thank God to the hard work and dedication of David Clark and
Right.
others,
Yeah.
the photograph was found. Craig Lindsay, the former RAF press officer, managed to get an on-camera interview with him. Then I got Nick Pope to go on camera, David Clark to go on camera, the guy that did some of the analysis work on the photograph going on camera, but we don't know what happened to the witnesses.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the last possible minute, we're over here editing away. It was a bunch of people in the room, and I've been contacting Richard Greaves over and over and over. And then, he kind of went dark, and I thought maybe I pushed too hard.
Yeah.
And he slipped between the cracks like a bar of soap in the bathtub or something. And then he called. And so that whole interview was done just completely unprepared. Grabbed my cell phone, quick, grab your cell phone, film me talking to my cell phone. And,
Yeah.
so it was it all happened like that. I mean, even Kirk McConnell, the Senate Armed Service Committee chief of staffer, flew up at the last minute, from Washington, D.C. And actually we actually filmed in here.
Wow.
For that interview.
Yeah,
So,
that was great having him on, even though it was just audio. But I'm glad you had like subtitles, because he was a little difficult to understand.
yeah.
But that was really great. But so the story is those guys were, it's hard to even say this, Men in Black type of situation.
When he was first telling me the story, I was like, well, hang on a second. So this is what you heard? He goes, no. He goes, I was standing outside having a cigarette break with my coworkers, the witnesses that took the photograph. We were standing outside, and this car rolls up. You saw this. Yes, I swear. I'm like, great. Yeah. It's one of my favorite lines in the movie. He says, I worked with them in the kitchen. I made poached eggs. They made toast.
That's right. And you just don't disappear after 34 years.
Yeah. And I had Patty Zuboff. She's been a copy editor with me for a while. She's very, very good at dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And she contacts me, and she's like, James, why did you leave that poached eggs and toast in? I don't, how's it relevant to the story? I looked at her, I was talking to her, I said, Patty, you don't find that really funny? And it's kind of a personal thing. And she's like, yeah, it is funny. Yeah. A good thing you left it in.
Yeah, that was funny. I did notice that. But that's great. And
you can't not notice that scene in the movie. Come on.
That's right.
I mean, it's a real moment, you know?
Yeah.
You only get a handful of those moments in the film, and it's like, it's relevant. It's personal. It's humanizing,
And, I thought there was a couple of mic drops. I mean, more than a couple. And one of them I really, really liked hearing from was Kirk McConnell.
Yes.
I want to say. And can you explain a little bit about him? He was an intelligence officer.
37 years on the Hill.
Yeah.
He was had multiple different clearances or security clearances. And he started in an official capacity investigating UFOs on the Hill. He'd been up there for a long time. Senate Armed Service Committee, in an official capacity, UAP, UFOs, from 2017, since the New York Times article published the secret Pentagon UFO program, up until 2024. And I guess he was frustrated from the excessive secrecy and lack of transparency that was going on, particularly with Sean Kirkpatrick, former head of AARO. And Len Val Logan was also part of the UAP task force, who's in the film, called me up one day. I was filming in DC, one of the last pickup film projects I was doing. He goes, hey, I got a guy. I think he's willing to come forward. And turned out to be Kirk. And we couldn't make it work while I was there with the camera crew in DC. Long story short, he's like, hey, I'll fly up from DC and I'll come meet you. And it was like one of the last, I think maybe I got Richard Greaves right after that, but that was the last couple of interviews that I got. Squeezed them into the movie, and and they made a colossal difference.
It did. I mean, some of the things he's saying, it's like, what?
Oh yeah, one of the, I kind of kicked myself because he got to, according to him, sit in a skiff with somewhere between 8 and 12 first-hand witnesses. Now, everyone criticizes David Grusch because he's not a first-hand witness. These were first-hand witnesses with high-level credentials, really credible, current officials testifying in a skiff that, yeah, this stuff's real. And I was asking him on a Reddit thing that we did. The Reddit community got together. This woman, helped put it together, Andrea. All the various Reddit communities got together to push for government transparency, and they featured Len Val Logan, myself, and Kirk McConnell, former staff member of the Senate Armed Service Committee. And I suddenly thought in the middle of it, and it was talk about a moment. I said, "Can you put us in that room? What it was like when you're sitting in a skiff with the senators, with a firsthand witness? What did it feel like? What were the expressions on the senators' faces? What did you feel like?" And I highly recommend anybody watching this go to my Twitter, now X, and watch it. It's probably somewhat buried at this point. We've had a lot of activity, but I can be found at James C. Fox, and I put a 2-minute segment up there, and it's one of the most powerful moments for me in my 30 years. Not the most, but certainly the top 5 of my 30 years investigating this stuff, because it really puts you in the room with a firsthand witness and senators and stuff, and the intensity of it, and the atmosphere, and the aftermath, trying to process it all.
Yeah.
It's pretty intense stuff.
I mean, can you imagine being in that situation and hearing what these people are hearing, and then you have to keep it to yourself? I mean, that, or your spouse or whatever it is, you have to just be tight-lipped about it. It must be so difficult.
Nobody can really relate to it, because I remember I had a similar thing from the outside. He was experiencing that on the inside. But when I was investigating, Moment of Contact, when I did the film Moment of Contact, and I was investigating this alleged UFO crash that happened in 1996 in Varginha, Brazil, every time I would come back from Brazil, like I was just like, I wouldn't call it PTSD, but it was profoundly moved by what I was learning. And I would come home, and a couple of times I started talking about it to my friends. I would go to an event at my son's soccer class, whatever. I'm talking to fellow parents, and oh my gosh, I heard you guys back from Brazil. And I start talking a little bit, and I could see them looking at me like I was absolutely nuts. and so I was like, okay,
I think we all have to put up with that.
Note to self, don't talk about this particular case at all.
Yeah.
Wait till the movie comes out.
Yeah.
And then trying to process it myself.
Yeah.
Coming to terms with it, because it's such a game changer. It changes everything.
Right.
So,
and speaking of Brazil, you're going to be heading down there in a few days. I don't know if you can talk about that, but also if you could talk about anything else as far as that case goes, the differences that, well, I know when anyone puts out a movie, all of a sudden they're contacted by people that are involved. All these new leads come up, and then you feel like, oh my God, there should be a part 2. A lot of times you hear about that in books and movies. So anything breaking or new, and as far as Brazil goes?
So we have, it's been on my list to go back. I mean, I've had a number of leads. It's so funny. Like George Knapp told me, don't read the comments, on any of the appearances that you do. And sometimes you can't help
Not
yourself.
bad advice though.
Well, and for the most part, people are pretty enthusiastic and supportive, and that's great. All one can do in the end of the day is try. And there were a couple of comments people made about, James said there was UFO, there was footage of the Varginha. Yeah, just because I said I think it exists. In fact, I'm quite sure that it does exist, because I talked to several doctors that have seen it, that I chased down. It's very, very difficult. It's a very difficult situation. The fear factor is very real in Brazil. Yeah. I mean, it's spooky poking around. They're threatening their own people. So you can imagine a foreigner like me out there poking around, trying to reveal something they desperately trying to keep secret. It's real, and it's a little scary, and I'm aware of that. And but that piece of footage, particularly if we got the provenance, would be a massive, unprecedented, game-changing event
of the world. Yes,
I think so. I mean, obviously,
would.
Look, there's
It
gonna
really
be a lot
would.
Of people
I mean,
are not going to believe it no matter what. So
that's right. But if it could
fine,
be,
but
the footage supposedly is in the hospital of the being, correct?
Yeah. Well, there's multiple different, but one in particular, yes.
Yeah.
Humanitas Hospital. I mean, the doctors in 1996, they were, comfortable. They owned cameras.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
some of the other service people, like the police department and the fire department, they had cameras.
Right.
And
Right.
then, of course, the military had cameras.
Yeah.
We've located a couple of things, and we'll see what happens. But there's other testimony that we're going after as well. It's not just that. And we've had some developments on this end. I don't want to go into too much detail, but there was with help with the gentleman, we filed a FOIA request so long ago that I'd actually forgotten about it.
Yeah.
It was over 2 years ago.
I've heard of people forgetting about them, and all of a sudden they show up.
Yeah, and it showed up yesterday, and it's quite telling.
Yeah.
It's quite telling.
I read it, but I'm keeping it to myself.
Yeah,
But thank you.
It's going to be featured in the director's cut of the new film, and I can talk about it a little bit. But essentially, from all the people that I've had look at it, say to me, "This is basically, if there was none of there, they would have said there's no there. They said we can't release this because of national security, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So it's like it basically implying that if we did release this information to you, and I was asking for the flight logs coming into a specific spot with specific dates. And they won't release those flight logs.
Yeah.
I have it in writing now from the CIA.
It's pretty awesome.
It's pretty crazy.
It's kind of chilling to read.
It's kind of chilling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to just shift gears. We'll talk more about bits and parts of the film, which I think is great. But since you've been doing this, how many films in total about UFOs do we have out?
That I've done?
Yes.
So I did. So I never know quite how to answer that question, because I did UFOs 50 Years of Denial in the mid-90s, and I finished it around 98, I would guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started on Out of the Blue in 99, 2000, and then sold people always ask me, like, when do you know a documentary's done? It's usually like you're out of money, you're collapsing, you're exhausted. I mean, and I remember one of my partners, Boris, was in a fetal position crying, his wife screaming at me, "You're killing my husband." And I've been there too. And but it wasn't quite where I wanted it to be, but we were done, man. We were we were out of gas, we were out of money, we were out of everything, just squeezed dry. And so then we sold that to NBC Universal. The Sci-Fi aired it, because I sold 50 Years of Denial to Discovery Communications, and then it aired on the Learning Channel. And then I got a letter 3 years later, because they bought like a 3-year broadcast option. Everything's changed since then, but a 3-year broadcast option, and that's it. So it goes to one entity. They do their thing with it for 3 years, and then I own it again.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you can put it on all these multiple platforms, and it can go to TVOD, which is transactional download. You can rent, and then it goes to these other things where you have ads, and there's lots of just so many more options nowadays. But then I got the rights back, and I was like, this film was never quite what I wanted it to be. I'm going to revisit, and I'm going to revamp Out of the Blue, which I spent, I think, 2.5 years doing.
Wonderful.
And in the process of that, I got that director's cut of Out of the Blue done. So I did 2 versions of Out of the Blue, and then I did that National Press Club event with Leslie Kean in 2007, and I made a 2-hour special out of that, and that's called I Know What I Saw. And I think I was 39 or 40 when I sold that, and then I was like, I need a break from UFOs.
Yeah.
And I stepped back. I did a cool little film in the BP oil spill called Pretty Slick. Right. I needed a break. I really needed a break. And in the back of my mind, I was like, I've tried, and I've kind of failed on every time I try to do the ultimate feature-length documentary film on the topic of UFOs. And so when I turned 43, I said, I'm going to give it one more crack. And that's when I did The Phenomenon. It took me 8 years.
And that was a tough one to get through. I remember when it was called 701.
Yeah, we had lots of,
a lot of different, but that was a tough one all the way through, right? I
feel like I was shackled.
It was but it was an amazing film. And
when I finished that one, I remember I was staying up. We had a little loft above my office, like a stair, like literally a steep staircase to go up to a loft, kind of like this loft here, but. And I had I'd never had one before. I had a complete and utter meltdown. I mean, basically, I won't bore your audience with the details of getting the film completed was an absolute nightmare. Like, just some reason, like, as closer you get to the finishing line, it becomes exponentially more difficult. And then there were all sorts of other factors that were coming into play. And then I got the film done. And then because of another whole series of issues, I was getting contacted by a distributor because we were getting threatened to sue because we had done a deal with Netflix, but then the Netflix deal fell through because it was during the, the height of the pandemic had hit, and all the previous deals that we had fell through because we were going to have a theatrical distribution, and
yes,
all these things happened. So suddenly, all these things fell through, and under the cloud of COVID, mistakes were made. And then basically, I remember my distributor going, we might have to just shelve this movie because it's kind of a liability right now. This guy's saying he's going to sue unless he gets this, and Netflix is pissed off, and you guys are going after Discovery. And oh my God, I just lost it.
Yeah.
Thinking I finally did my dream movie. It's the movie that I've always set out to do, that I spent 25, 30, whatever, 25 years to accomplish. And it's probably not going to see the light of day, or it could not see the light of day. And I just hit my breaking point,
Yeah.
And on top of that, I had gone back and forth to Brazil over a 12-year period investigating this alleged crash case that happened in '96. And I ended up cutting all that out of the phenomenon, right? So anyway, so I got the phenomenon.
Right. Oh yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, that's right. I remember you saying you had to cut it out to make it stand alone.
Yeah, I did that. And then I set my sights on I'm rambling, but I set my sights on that case and made a whole movie on it, Moment of Contact.
Yeah.
And then I learned that the U.S. was involved in the possible retrieval of some of those materials, bodies, from Virginia in 1996, because one of the Brazilian authorities, the flight control officer, radar that monitors all the incoming flights in a particular region, came forward on a podcast on camera. It's I watched the flight come in, and they didn't have Brazilian government authorization to land.
Whoa.
And I was like, USAF. He kept saying USAF. It's the United States Air Force. This plane came in on the 20th of, I think he said it was the 20th of January, 1996. And then this higher up came in the room and said, let the plane land. So now I've got the connection with the United States. I'd heard it rumored, but now I had a pretty solid information that the U.S. was involved. And so naturally, going into the program, I was probably 5 months, I would have never guessed, 5 months after the release of Moment of Contact, that a high-level intelligence officer, David Grusch, would testify under oath to a bipartisan group of lawmakers that there's a crash retrieval program and biologics. I would have never seen that one coming.
Right.
Because I really feel like in some respects, Moment of Contact might have been a little ahead of its time. Maybe people weren't quite ready for it.
Yeah.
And so naturally that opened the door for me investigating the program, right? Because I wanted to go to Washington, D.C. and find out what we could uncover about this so-called crash retrieval program. And David Grusch opened the door for me. So it was just like divine intervention. I mean, it was a miracle that happened. I remember when I was watching it live, I was sitting right over here on the other side of the barn, and my son was trying to get me to come outside and play with him. And it was one of the only times I ever looked at him and I just said, not now. And I had tears just streaming down my face as I was all this weight off my shoulders, because being laughed at and ridiculed. And I thought, this is coming out.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't believe this moment is happening. I never thought I'd live to see it.
Yeah, me neither. That was kind of a shock, the whole thing, going through that. So let's talk a little bit about you.
So how many docs is that? That's like 6.5.
Oh yeah. Right? I didn't get the number. Yeah. 6.5. Yeah. You remembered.
I don't know what, out of the blue, is that 2 versions? Oh, it's definitely 2 versions.
Yeah.
Does that really count as a half of it? What is,
Yeah.
Anyway.
But yourself, I guess I want to ask you, how has this road you have taken affected your development in your life these days? I mean, for myself, I can talk real quickly that since I've started to look into this, in this whole phenomenon, I think it's been a gift to me in many, many ways. But it also, we get these, situations where, people ridicule, they think you're crazy for looking into this. I think I lost a really good job that I had because of looking into this topic. But I mean, it all worked out great. I'm glad it worked out that way. I much rather work for myself anyway. But I mean, how has this affected you and changed your life going down this road that you've gone down?
You know, I get online criticism, you know, now, and it's what, being called a grifter and all these things, and not a lot of it, but some of it,
Yeah.
And there's a part of part of me that just goes, this guy has no idea what I've been through, just trying to get to the bottom of this. I mean, to me, it's a personal investigation. I just happen to share my results of my research publicly with my films, right? I bring a camera with me and I document. I'm just a very curious person by nature, and I want to get to the bottom of something. I'm coming to the realization I'm probably never going to get to the bottom of it. But but I have to laugh now because I had so much criticism for so long in my life, like ridiculed, laughed at, made fun of. I remember I would go to like cocktail parties and I would ask people, do me a favor, and don't tell people what I do. Because initially I was kind of excited about it, but then I just felt under attack, and I would spend the whole night just having to defend my position. And really, quite honestly, at the end of the day, I had no interest in doing that anymore. So now I get criticism. I'm like, it's kind of like water off a duck's back, because I'm like,
yeah,
you think this is criticism? You should have seen what I've been through in the 90s and early 2000s.
I'm sure you get this one because I always get it. So you believe in UFOs?
You're a believer.
Yeah, you're a believer.
Yeah. I think to myself, it's not a question of believing. It's more like you either know about the phenomenon or you don't.
And then the question is, what are they? I mean, not if you believe. I mean, they're obviously unidentified. Yeah.
Anytime I see anybody, I saw Tucker Carlson talking about it with Michael Schellenberger, I think today online. And Tucker's like, oh yeah, I know what they are. They're not extraterrestrial. They're, and I got no beef with Tucker, but I'm like, Tucker, you can't make any of those definitive statements. Yeah. I've been researching this all around the world for 30 years, and I have no idea where they come from.
Yeah.
I think it could be all the above.
Yeah.
Could be interdimensional, could be time travelers, could be us in the future. Who the hell knows? Could be some interdimensional. It could be some, look at the Betty and Barney Hill case.
Yeah.
They said they're from a particular star constellation. Maybe, just maybe they're interplanetary. Maybe they were interplanetary. Maybe there's some that's time travelers. Maybe some are already here. Maybe some, what I mean? Why not it be all of those answers? I'm just saying, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd like to know.
Yeah. And here's a question I ask a lot of people. My own position is that I don't think the government really knows the whole picture. What is your opinion on that?
I would have to believe that. Yeah, I would have to believe that. I mean, obviously they've got definitive proof that that they're real. They've got all the sensory data. They've got recovery wreckage. They've got bodies. I'm convinced. But that doesn't mean they have all the answers. In fact, I was talking to an individual the other day who will remain nameless. Someone that I would say would be in a position to know. And this individual said to me that they were quite certain that there was about 20 people that had a bigger picture idea of what was going on, like a big picture, the bigger picture, not like they understand all of the complexities to the phenomenon, but the bigger picture, and that it was a little scary.
But do they have a legacy type of situation where it'll be passed down? I mean, people retire and die.
Yeah.
I mean, so that always made me wonder about all the way back from Roswell, era to here, what happens to these little secrets as they generationally move forward.
I heard that the 1953 Kingman, Arizona UFO would get taken out every 10 years to see if the scientists had gotten caught up with it yet. They sort of take it out, dust it off, have a new bunch of scientists take a look at it, scratch their heads, put it back in there for another 10 years, bring it back out again.
Now they have AI.
Yeah. And
maybe that'll do something.
And then I remember somebody saying, yeah, it was like, they just landed and walked away. I was like, well, how do you know they landed and walked away? How do you know that?
Yeah.
Well, because there was the object was empty. There was nobody in it. It didn't crash. It was a controlled landing, and the doors were open. Oh, okay.
You can sort of assume, but maybe not.
So would that have been a gift? Did the 1953 Kingman, Arizona case, was it a gift? Have they figured it out? I have no idea. I don't know.
And there's controversy about that case, if I remember right.
There's
Whether
controversy about every case.
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
There's no crash case that's not controversial.
Yeah,
When you're talking about a crash retrieval or live aliens or dead aliens or whatever, or technology, how could that not be controversial? You
Yeah.
can't make that big of a claim without having that's why you have to allegedly, theoretically, this kind of thing.
yeah.
But yeah, sorry.
No. Well, since we're on the topic of controversial, let's talk a little bit about Jason Sands, because I think if there's any part of your documentary that people have been saying is a little controversial,
Yes.
is about Jason Sands. So can we talk a little bit about that? What do you?
Okay, well, I'll talk about his encounter, then I'll talk about some other things about him as
Okay.
well, because
I know you have some pictures to show.
yeah, I
there,
do. I can show you. I did bring some, and I also brought a statement. So I'll start off with what I know.
Yeah.
And let's see. I don't know how well you can see this. You can see that well.
Yep, I can see it
It's
perfectly.
at Nellis Test Range, circa 1993, 94, something like that.
Yep.
Okay. We got another one here. There's Jason Sands right there.
Yep.
And we got another one here. I've got his wife covered up because she requested.
Oh,
that.
I see. Yeah.
That's why I just put that over her face, because
Yeah.
she said, "Please promise me you won't reveal my identity." I said, "Okay, no problem. I'll cover you up." She
Yeah.
made me promise.
Yeah.
And here's another one here. Jason Sands right here.
Yeah.
And then I have this. And this is from a congressional source that I met face to face with on a couple of occasions. From a congressional source who was aware of his testimony. Mr. Sands testified to 3 congressional committees and AARO as a whistleblower. His military and intelligence community background, clearances, and assignments were fully vetted. We were not, however, able to validate some of the details of his extraordinary testimony. However, Mr. Sands' testimony provided significant new insights that were later validated by multiple witnesses. Now, Mr. Sands makes an extraordinary claim. I remember working on my first UFO documentary in the mid-90s, when I don't remember which sort of tabloidy TV show it was. Inside Edition, maybe, I'm not sure. And there was leaked UFO footage from Nellis Test Range with the voices of the individuals talking about this UFO that was on the base. It was filmed on the base from all the multiple sensors at Nellis Test Range in the winter of 1994. And I remember that. I almost featured it in one of my docs. According to Jason Sands, 3 days later, he was in a convoy with a number of individuals. We have their names, first and last. It was three trucks, 3 Blazers, Chevy Blazers, camoed Blazers. And I think there was 3 or 4 in the first truck, a couple in the second truck, and a couple in the third truck. And it was early in the morning, wintertime, very cold. And they were driving up to a place called Quartz, I think it was Quartz Mountain. And they're within the Nellis Test Range. So they're on military area, civilians can't get to. And according to Mr. Sands, he claims that they saw an individual on the side of the road that looked like he was wearing a similar outfit as theirs, military gear, that looked like in distress and needed help.
Walking funny, right?
Walking funny, trying to running awkward, almost like it was going to fall over. There was just something odd. And they thought maybe it was like a plane crash or something happened. This individual needed help. And as they got a little closer, he looked like he had a little slight blue tint to his skin. Maybe he was like suffering from hypothermia. They weren't entirely sure. And when they came up on him, on this individual, the guy in the passenger seat, we have that individual's name, first and last, actually got in touch with them. He screams, "He's got no effing ears." Jason was sitting behind the driver in the back seat of the Chevy Blazer, and he gets out the passenger door, and he's thinking to himself, this guy is in dire need of medical attention, and you're going to make fun of his birth defect of no ears? Like, what kind of person are you, kind of thing. And he's getting out the back, and he said he's taking his jacket off because he's going to give the guy some warmth. It was very cold. And then that's when he locked eyes on this individual, and he said it was almost like a snake bite, like shocking. Like, this person is this a mutant? Is this what is this? This is not a human that I'm familiar with. The eyes were really, really big. The ears were, all the lobes, everything was on the inside. This was clean cut, and the eyes were really, really big. And he starts speaking some sort of gibberish, almost like Swedish or something, some Scandinavian.
But somehow
language.
he was understanding the words.
But he said, according to Jason Sands, that he could understand everything that the guy was saying. He was looking for some type of metal, tantalum or something. He said that another thing he noticed was that his army fatigues running through the desert should have had dust and dirt all over them, but they didn't have a speck anywhere.
That is such a bizarre part of the story.
Bizarre part of the story, exactly. Anyway, I wrestled with this story for some time. First of all, I probably took, the Phenomenon was the first documentary that I ever actually covered alleged close encounters of the third kind, right? I always felt like it was a bit of a slippery slope. I mean, that's a tall order you're going to talk about,
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone out there knows close encounter of the third kind is when the witness claims to see entities, beings, aliens, whatever you want to call them, connected to the spacecraft, or,
Yeah.
because you got close encounter of the first kind, somebody claiming to see a UFO. Second kind interferes or interacts with the environment. In Richard Dreyfuss's case, in close encounter of the third kind, it's when he burned his face and marks on the ground, whatever. So third kind is entities. And I covered a couple of those cases. I covered Socorro, I covered Rua, I covered Virginia, I covered the case in off the coast of Australia, Papua New Guinea, with Father Gill.
Father Gill.
And that
Love
was
that
like
one.
58 or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, and the landing case in Australia wasn't quite a close encounter of the third kind. However, some witnesses came forward and said that might have happened, but that's another story. So I only have his testimony. We have the leaked video from 3 days prior on the base. His credentials checked out. I mean, I talked to everybody I possibly could within the intel about this individual's his credentials. I got his military records printed, over there, and I went through all of that. And I remember, because some people were like, he's got PTSD and he's got some issues. There's no question of that. Exposure to things that he's done in his life, and but his story, everything else checks out. I mean, he's named, even like this one individual said, I got in trouble just for asking about the program that he knew the name of. This he checks out. Like, he is who he says he is, and he was where he says he was. So I remember I was feeling really frustrated, and I finally got this. We found the individual that allegedly debriefed all the military people after the alleged encounter. That individual would not confirm or deny. I think the way they phrased it is, we're aware of the incident, but we're not, wouldn't confirm or deny, not even on or off the record. There's nothing. So I was really frustrated, and I remember saying, okay, I literally said, well, I talked to a couple of people. I was like, do you think this happened, or do you think it? What do you think? People that I trusted, they're like, well, despite his PTSD and despite some of his other claims, we think it happened. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to feature this. I'm going to feature it.
But what about the people that were with him? Did you try to?
I have to be careful how I say this, but we did reach out. We did reach out to one, started a correspondence, and as soon as we mentioned the encounter, ghosted.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, how you doing? Long time no see, blah, blah, blah. Hey, do you remember the blah, 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 gone. That was it.
Yeah.
And then I have other names, and it's an ongoing thing. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love, because we have a location. We have roughly a date. We can get the exact date. And we have some names, first and last. So,
the crazy thing about his uniform, just wearing a uniform like theirs.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but to me, when a story's bizarre like that, it almost gives more credibility to the story than,
It's a
just an
weird
encounter
detail
with
to make up.
I mean, it's a weird detail. Why would you make that up?
Yeah.
It's so bizarre. And so I like those type of stories.
Two other things I thought about too, and Jason Sands had, it's a long, complicated story. He had gone on a couple of I don't know, X, it's like joining a group on X, and Sane's making some other kind of
spaces, I think they call them.
Yeah, the spaces, making some one or two really kind of outlandish claims. And I remember calling him up going, like, even in the 0.001% chance that is true, like, that's the most discrediting thing I think I've ever, like, you can't, what do you, anyway, I was frustrated, but I was like, I was the one that blew his cover by accident. Like, I'm the one that
I
revealed
heard
his
about
name.
that. It was
I
actually
felt
the
really bad about
storyboard,
it.
like behind you, right?
It was a little clipboard, and it was in the shot of behind the scenes, and it had his name written on it. And if you zoomed in, you could see his name. And so I kind of blew his cover, and I felt bad about it because he hadn't gone through the Dobson process. He wasn't thinking about going public, like, with his name and everything else. It wasn't sure he was ready for that. And that kind of accelerated that whole process. But I remember thinking about a couple of things. One is, I met Robert Bigelow, and it was right after the letter I showed you with Steven Spielberg from 2009. Yeah. So I that film kind of probably came out in late 2009. I know what I saw. And I got an email, which I could show you. I still have it. I got an email from Robert Bigelow's secretary, and she said, "Mr. Fox, got a message from Robert Bigelow. Wants to congratulate you on your movie, A Job Well Done." And I thought, well, I heard about Bigelow. Oh, wow, Bigelow. And so we ended up getting together at his house in Las Vegas. And this was like probably late 2009, maybe 2010. I can't remember the exact date. And so I went to his home. I think I was with my sister, and we had lunch. And he talked about two things that really kind of stuck in my head. One was the politics of disclosure. And he was like, yeah, we'd done the study, and, we made the determination after a year or 2 years, whatever it was, that it would have this impact on organized religion. It would have an impact on financial institutions. And he literally said, take all the scandals you've ever heard in life and multiply that by 1,000 or 1,000,000 or whatever. And that is what we think the impact that this story is going to have on the human race, which I'm not so sure I agree with that, but whatever. And then he said, and they're walking among us. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not sure. What do you mean? And he said, they're walking among us. They're walking among us. Well, I'm sorry. What do you mean by that? And he goes, I mean exactly that. They're walking among us. Now, I certainly wasn't ready for that information back in 2009. I hadn't covered any Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I'd heard about some, and obviously I'd heard about abductions and but I'd always steered clear. I thought, and I wasn't ready for it. But I did have to say that, this guy's put more investment, hired, NIDS and all the intellectual heavyweights and scientific community and all the studies and the contracts with government and I guess he would be in a position to know if it were true. I can't just believe it because it's him telling me that. But then I also thought about, when I got together with Gary McKinnon, and Gary McKinnon was what considered to be one of the biggest computer hackers in the history of, and he was just trying to find out UFO secrets and got caught and nearly went to jail for the rest of his life if he was America. To be in America, if he was going to be extradited from England. Right. And one of the two things he said was, one, he found a list of non-terrestrial officers. That's what he said. Wow. Back in late 90s, early 2000s, whatever the year that was, at least 20 years ago. At least 20 years ago. He's like, I found this list. I saw this object. It was a cigar shaped, had this bubble, blah, blah. It was floating in the atmosphere. Really good resolution, no rivets, all that stuff. And then he said, and I found this list of non-terrestrial officers. And it's like, well, I guess one could argue that could be astronauts, I guess. But it's weird to call them non-terrestrial officers. I've never heard that reference anywhere before. But it just got me thinking, because I remember time and time again, like this, the phenomenon's pretty crazy. It's pretty out there. And just because I hear something, and I've learned this from 30 years, is like, you have that knee-jerk reaction of this can't possibly be true, therefore it isn't.
Yeah.
I've learned to suspend judgment and go, okay, I'll listen to this. And
yeah. Now I remember I remember hearing about him hacking, those many
that
years
story
ago,
was huge.
before it was dial-up. And
when it was dial-up,
how he did it with dial-up all the way back then. And just amazing. But I had never heard, because I wasn't really paying much attention to the UFO world.
Yeah.
I just had heard that he had done it, and that he was,
he was
most
everywhere
likely
in the news.
Yeah, most likely going to be extradited. And
and
it was
facing
like
60 years in prison or something.
something like that. Was it
At least 60,
espionage,
maybe
or
70.
I think it was espionage, or what was the charge?
Well, I remember he told me, he said he knew that he'd been caught when he was in one of these systems at Johnson Space Center, and he was downloading that image.
The image of the Earth and the
craft and the cigar-shaped craft. And he said he saw the cursor move, and then the screen, and he goes, it was my eureka moment, but also that moment where, shit, I've been caught. And I think it was a couple months later, he woke up in the morning in London with men in suits over his bed.
Yeah.
Talk about spooky.
Yeah.
And that was it, baby. Just,
Yeah.
Imagine waking up and they're in your house.
And then,
That's
you hear
crazy.
that he can't go out of the country now
for
the rest of his life, basically.
Yep.
Which is really something.
Yeah.
So one of the things I
think you should get a pardon.
Yeah, I do too. One of the things
he paid his dues. He didn't do anybody any harm.
I know this is kind of silly, but one of the things I really love about your documentaries is the narrator, Peter Coyote.
I love Peter Coyote, yeah.
His I wish he could tell me bedtime stories.
Oh my gosh. I'd like to get him next time I know what I'm gonna do. I'm so glad you made me think of this. The next time I get him to narrate a movie, I'm gonna get him, hey, on this side, can you just say how you've reached the voicemail of James Bond? Please leave a message.
Yeah, you should do that. Yeah.
I'll think of something more creative and fun than that, but yeah.
I used to live out near Marin County. He lives there, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere out there. Yeah, I remember
hearing he moved. He used to live either in Sausalito or Mill Valley or something. Right. Now he's living in like Sebastopol or something.
Oh yeah.
He relocated.
Yeah. And I did want to say this, that and I know we talked about it earlier before the show, but I really feel so sorry for the poor people out in California, and many of them have been on the show that have had terrible situations. It's just a terrible thing ongoing. It's, I know,
unimaginable.
Yeah,
unimaginable. Like unimaginable. You're very that's all you. I mean, you're lucky to even have that. Like your sanctuary,
right?
Your home, your possessions, your bed, and to all just be taken away in a flash,
right?
I mean, it's so devastating. It's just it's really
yeah. So my heart out to all you people out there, and there's no need for these silly conspiracy theories about. There's all kinds of. I mean, all you have to do is open social media, and you hear like a directed pulses and lasers and all that. And people don't understand this, but I do, because my sister lost her house in a fire, a forest fire, and basically what happened was, she had ashes on the floor from an oak dresser, right on the floor, and then 6 feet away was an antique table with a newspaper on it. So what happens is the air pockets of air, the fire does these little flashes,
right? And
that's what people can't understand. They're saying, why are these trees okay when the bridge is burned out? That type of thing. But that's fire is a strange thing.
And I've seen pictures of a house standing and everything around it burned.
Right.
All the other houses burned.
Yeah.
That's just some kind of weird.
Yeah. And someone that was on the show recently, on my show here, I won't say his name because I don't have his permission, but he sent me a video, and his house was saved. The firemen were right there spraying his house while his neighbor's house was burned right down.
I mean,
but his house made it with some damage.
Yeah.
But at least he still has it. And it's really sad. But anyway, on to back onto your movie, the Calvine photo.
Yes.
I love that photo. I had David Clark on a couple of times talking about that. I think that's my personal feelings on that is the best photo that I know about.
Show me a better one.
Yeah. I mean, there's that one in Australia that's pretty
Yep.
amazing. The guy took with a Polaroid.
James Kibble.
Right.
Yeah, I got
That's
him
pretty
to
amazing.
reveal that for the first time in The Phenomenon.
Yeah, I remember
I mean,
that.
that's a good photograph, but nowhere. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's an object, and yeah, it's cool. I mean, you can definitely see it. Like
Yeah.
he said, he literally said in his haste, James Kibble, I got him on camera. He'd been hiding for 50 years. He said that he saw the thing. He had his, you know, did he say it was a Polaroid?
I think it was a Polaroid.
Polaroid.
Yeah.
Yeah. He said he was documenting his garden for his mother.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he got this flash and he looked up and there was his disc. And I think he said it was like kind of doing this, kind of like a leaf kind of falling. And he grabbed his camera and he said in his haste, he hit himself in the face, split his nose open.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But clicked. And as it did so, it went like this.
Yeah.
Boom. He clicked the picture, got one. And then he said it sped off at an unbelievable rate of speed. And I asked him, I was like, can you describe the acceleration? And he said it was like being shot out of a gun, like the barrel of a gun.
Yeah.
Just bam, gone.
Yeah.
Really,
You hear that so many times.
really did.
Things just shoot off.
But the Calvine UFO photograph, thank you, David Clark, and all the others that were involved in that case. And thank you to Richard Grieve for coming forward, because that definitely is a big piece of the puzzle that was missing. And I believe Richard Grieve and obviously Craig Lindsay, the former press officer for RAF, Royal Air Force, Nick Pope coming on and commenting on it. I know that
he talked about that photo for years behind.
He did, yeah. I heard about it in the late 90s, and his book,
Yeah.
I think, Open Skies, Closed Minds, I think it was. But yeah, I remember I interviewed Nick Pope for pretty much most of my movies. I remember very boyish, you know.
Yeah.
We'd go and I'd meet him at Parliament when he was at the desk of the MOD, and come out and shoot an interview, or maybe go to lunch and have a couple pints. And
Nice.
do this interview, this little young boyish. I mean, he looked like he was like 25.
Right. Yeah.
You know, but I would ask him, like, hey, what's some of the best cases? And he just would always say, oh, there was this
Poster made of it.
I think he said, excuse me for yawning. I think he said it took place in Scotland. There were two hikers and they had like 5 prints and this object. I don't remember if he talked about the military jet, but he definitely talked about points of reference and this big diamond-shaped UFO. And I remember thinking, oh, like, what happened to that picture? It was on a poster. I pestered him because I was like, look, he goes, I don't know, man. I left. I'm retired now. I said, well, contact the people that you were working with. They're around. They didn't throw the photograph in the garbage can. I guarantee you somebody kept it.
Yeah.
You know, and what about your predecessor? You know, all this stuff. And all I can say, again, I can't overstate the significance of the work that David Clark did, because they buried that story.
Yeah.
And it would have never seen the light of day had it not been for the work they did. And had it not been for Craig Lindsay holding on to that one print.
Right.
You know, and I asked Craig Lindsay about that, and I'm sure you know this, or maybe you do, or maybe you don't. But I asked him, I was like, well, what did the other 5 prints look like? I wasn't sure if there was 6 or 5 in total, in all. But he said that Craig Lindsay had seen them all. He said that you had that diamond-shaped, disc, diamond, whatever you want to call it, ground, fence.
Yeah.
And then you have what turns out they're almost positive it was a Harrier jump jet.
Yes.
And that, the camera guy got up the courage, because I guess they were hiding under the tree. They were terrified.
Yeah.
What is this silent object just hovering there, suspended in the sky right there? And when the jet came, that's when they got the courage out and took 5 or 6 photos. And he said that the jet, this is according to, and other people said there were 2 jets. I'm just telling you what Craig Lindsay told me. He said it was picture, click, click, object, click, click, click. So the Harrier jet goes right round, and they take a picture. Yeah. And the Harrier jet's in a different position, but the disc or the diamond-shaped craft is stationary. And then after that, it just shot off straight up. Yeah.
And that's not going to be one of ours. I mean, there's speculation that it was something to do with some of our, maybe an experimental craft or something like that. But we're not going to have anything shoot straight up.
I mean,
I don't think.
Look, we can't absolutely eliminate the possibility that it was some super secret military prototype, whatever you want to call it. I have a tough time with that because of the technology. That was what, 34 years ago, 35 years ago. That's a huge story. If that's the case, they managed to keep this revolutionary technology from us. And I'm not saying, look, I can never say never. My inkling, based on all the research that I've done, is that that was not our technology. That would fall into the category of other, but I could be wrong.
Right.
I could be wrong. Either way, it's a huge story, because if it is one of ours, then it's, for all intents and purposes, I guess it would be considered anti-gravitic technology.
Yeah.
Or certainly something that an object with no wings, no visible means of propulsion, didn't make any sound, that could hover, fly, and then go straight up into,
right. Crazy. So I just want to say goodbye to everyone over at KGRA. We'll be back next week with Ryan Graves, and I also have Terry Randall on from Nova. So that's an in studio with Ryan Graves next week. Thank you at KGRA Radio. Now, James, I'd like to have you on for a little while longer.
Yeah.
And I would like to discuss what you think about the drone situation.
I got a text from this Air Force colonel that was actually helping me dig my teeth into the Varginha UFO case, because he was like, look, if that plane really did come in and land in Campinas, I'll get to this in a second. I got contacted by this guy anonymously for several months. We're going back and forth with emails, and he was very knowledgeable. And I get contacted by a lot of people. This guy stood out. I was like, this guy is really, really knowledgeable. Finally, one day I was like, who are you? And he goes, well, actually, I'm a former United States Air Force colonel. I'm also a fighter pilot, and I had a very dramatic UFO encounter in 1980 in Europe.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, that explains it. Yeah. Well, he actually has a cameo in the program,
in the outtakes.
Yeah, exactly. And he texted me a couple of weeks ago when the film came out. And he goes, James, let me ask you a question. How did you manage to orchestrate an alien invasion or a drone UAP invasion to coincide with the release of your movie?
Perfect.
I was like, how did you do that? Because I'd like to know,
That's an expensive ad campaign.
Yeah. And so I was reaching out to everybody I could possibly reach out to, because I knew everyone was going to be asking me those questions. What I find unusual is that the size of the drones, the loiter time of the drones. I mean, obviously, I'm sure that the United States military has highly advanced drones that we're totally not even aware of. I mean, they probably have things that look like a bird that fly out there too. I'm sure they've got, I remember going to the 1950s and 60s. It's the like the James Bond equivalent museum of like all the high-tech stuff that was done, 40, 50, 60 years ago. Have you heard about that? It's in Washington, D.C. I don't remember the name of it. No. Holy smokes.
Sounds like it gotta go.
You're seeing stuff that was obviously classified at the time, but like dragonflies from like the 1950s or 60s.
Really?
Intricate, that could fly, and they look exactly like a dragonfly.
Crazy.
50 years ago.
Wow.
I was blowing my mind. You can only imagine what they have nowadays.
Right.
You know what I mean? Nanotechnology, NATs, whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm certain it's quite possible there's an element of that. However, there were 50 drones coming in off the ocean that scratching their heads. The government's going, we don't know what they are, but don't worry about it. Everything's fine. It's like, wait a minute.
It's kind of like the UFO thing.
I jokingly said that about the movie Jaws on Rogan, because it was like, you remember Jaws when they were like, the mayor was like, everything's fine. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about, they have this
swim.
Massive tourist-based industry economy, and they don't want to, everything's fine. And it's so funny, like they would say that. It's just like Bill Nelson, the head of NASA. I was so glad that I got that question into him, because he's going, we don't know what they are, but they're not extraterrestrial. I'm like, how could you say what something isn't when you don't know what it is?
Exactly.
So to answer your question on the drone thing, I think it's complex. And I think that if there was an easy answer, they'd give it to us. But something weird's going on, because there's orbs that are being seen as well. There's a high loiter time. Why would they be flying these things over residential areas night after night after night. I mean, I had friends that lived there calling me going, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
We've never seen anything like this.
And I got to tell you, in my conversation with
I don't
Ryan,
know. So to answer
yeah.
your question, I don't know. I wish I did. I don't.
Yeah. The conversation I had recently with Ryan Graves,
Yeah.
he said that nothing is slowed down. It's just the media reporting. He said they're still ongoing. And I still get things sent to me. Like today, someone sent me something. I think it was from Norway, drones over there. I mean, this isn't just the United States and New Jersey. It's, and you know, it was around Christmas time for a couple of years in a row that it happened.
Yeah.
I mean,
I read a report by a guy named Jeff Nusatelli, I think it is, who was stationed at Vandenberg Air Force Base. I think it was 2003, 2004, 2005, where he talks about these incursions with orbs and these massive football field size, triangles over the base. Yeah. I think that's a case that yeah. So there's nothing. Yeah, these things have been happening.
Yeah.
For the Foo Fighters back in the World War II,
right.
Orbs. Yeah. So I don't know, something weird going on. There's no question of that. I mean, why? I remember the former Senate Majority Leader Schumer, commenting, and there was somebody in the crowd screaming, these drones, and he goes, these drones, I'm sorry, you wrote the legislation, you guys are calling them UAPs. Well, we don't know what they are. Yeah, exactly. So it's an unidentified aerial or anomalous phenomenon. It's in the bloody sky, but I think they used the word drones because they knew that UAP had a bit of a scarier, because it's like, that's like, one associates UFO, UAP less, but with otherworldly, right? Not us or not any kind of foreign. So I think they use the word drones because it makes people sleep better.
Maybe that's what it is.
And there might be some of the drones, and maybe there's some drones, some conventional. This is really weird. These are not your hobby drones. I fly drones.
Right.
These are highly sophisticated, very large, long loiter time, hours and hours and hours.
Yeah. And then
what are they doing?
Right. And then there was some people reporting that they flew a drone up to one and their drone died.
Fell out of the sky.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that a number of those instances. Yeah.
So, what is that all about? It's another weird mystery. And
that could be military.
Yeah, that's true. It could be big.
Military would have that ability, I would imagine, to drop other things. It could be a potential threat out of the sky. I mean, I don't know. I mean, because a bona fide UFO usually has an evasive action. Anytime you go, they usually take off at a pretty high rate. I'm just saying, I don't, certainly would be fitting of lots of incidences in the past.
Yeah. So what do you think is, you mentioned that you may revamp one of your older movies. Do you have things planned in the,
that was the
that's
NSA.
Identified.
Yeah. That was the NSA.
What do you have in the future, planned in the future? Anything planned?
Yeah, well, I'm going back to Brazil.
Yeah.
I'm going to revamp, just like I did with Out of the Blue. I'm going to do that with Moment of Contact. I'm going to bring it up to 2025. We got some new developments on the case. We got the FOIA thing. We got a number of new people coming forward, forensic pathologists, things of that nature. Going to get them on camera. I've got a brilliant idea for the whole new. I got it all mapped out, and then I'm probably going to do an event at the National Press Club. I've been talking a little bit about that with Leslie Kane, and because things are happening so quickly right now that it would be good, I think, and I could make a movie out of it, just like I did with I Know What I Saw. I could document it, like get all the witnesses out. The common theme would be not totally sure. I'm still thinking it through, but it would be because I'm curious, what is it going to take? Because everyone's frustrated because where are these firsthand witnesses? Well, first of all, they're terrified for their security and safety, not just their careers, but the fear factor is real, right? Yeah. So I'm curious, and I'm looking into this. Like, what would it take? Let's just say that the incoming administration wanted to wave their magic wand and provide immunity for these firsthand witnesses to come forward and testify under oath in open congressional hearings. Because we know that a handful of them have done it in a skiff behind closed doors, right? Yeah. But what is it going to take to get them at the comfort level they need to come forward and reveal the details needed to verify the claims they're making? You know what I mean?
Do you think they would ever let that happen?
Well, when you say they, you mean the people that the keepers of the secret?
Yeah, the gatekeepers, so
the
to speak.
gatekeepers.
Yeah.
I think they're losing control of the situation. I don't think they're gonna hold on. But I don't think so. I think they probably know it. At this point, it's probably somewhat of a controlled disclosure, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember the closest we ever came to what felt like potential, I wouldn't say disclosure, but certainly a push in that direction, was 2007, 2008, when England was releasing their previously classified files, MOD and the French were doing the same, and other countries were having like things being released. There wasn't a whole lot of traction at the time going on in the United States. However, we found out later that there was, but it was it was all done in secret. Because when I was meeting with Bigelow back in 2009, he was working with OSAP, which eventually evolves into ATIP. So Leslie Kane and I were asking for a new government investigation into UFOs, and guess what? It was happening at that time. Isn't that weird to think about? Yeah. We were like, start a new Project Blue Book. Well, it was. And it was OSAP and ATIP, and it was underground. It was hidden, and it leaked 10 years later. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that's great.
Something funny little factoid.
Yeah, something I have talked about maybe once or twice on this, but I find it really interesting. South Carolina. So I spent some time involved in a group, strummers. We strum our guitars, and talking to a guy there who I did a little UFO presentation there, which was great. We had 250 people show up. I did UFO 101 there.
Is that literally what you called it, or?
Yes. Yeah. For, people just interested in it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I had a really a fun time doing that. But this guy says, oh, yeah, I had a water cooler talk when I worked for the government with the UFO guys in Ohio at,
Patterson Air Force Base.
And he says, yeah, I had water cooler talk all the time. I said, oh, yeah, when was that? In the late 60s? And he said, yeah, right into the 1970s. I said, wait a minute, not 1970. And he said, yeah, 1970, after 1970. He goes, I don't know exactly when, but he said, you were still talking to these guys about UFOs then. And I said, Project Blue Book closed in 1969.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting. Now I can't, I see him all the time when I'm down there, but I don't think I can get any further than that, but I thought it was interesting.
I think of Project Blue Book, and it's almost synonymous with that one statement by Errol Brown, was the Secretary of the Air Force, when he's got this little shit-eating grin on his face, and then the camera's on his face, and he kind of straightens up, and he's like, we have not been hiding anything.
That's right. I love that.
I must have given that quote so much runtime with because it's so telling, it's like same old
robotic.
I don't know if you noticed with the program, there was a moment during the press conference at NASA where they were just like reeling off the same baloney they've been reeling off for, and then I juxtaposed, the Air Force saying the same thing 50, 60
That's right. I
years
love
ago.
the way you did that.
Yeah.
I love the way Jay Allen Hynek is repeating.
No.
That's exactly it.
Birds, unidentified, misidentified aircraft. Balloons,
that was beautiful.
I
love that. Yeah. So, I mean, one thing, and what NASA was doing, they were working with just unclassified information.
So silly. That was
so it doesn't even
designed to fail.
It's of course window dressing, as you say. I would like to play the trailer to the program.
Please,
right now.
Let's do it.
Here we go.
In 2017, the New York Times published a story exposing a secret government program investigating UFOs.
That story was kind of a catalyst for a lot of things that have happened since. Members of Congress started to ask questions.
Instruments report there is something there.
There are flight characteristics that we can't explain.
UAPs are unexplained. It's true. They need to be investigated.
Here we are having a hearing where just a few years ago, we didn't even acknowledge that these things were real.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
You're telling me people have come forward claiming firsthand knowledge of craft of non-human origin?
That's correct. We have sources who have asserted not only that there have been crashes, but there have been crash retrievals.
Do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
Biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they human or non-human?
Non-human.
I'm sitting here today
because the American people are being lied to.
We are the American government, and we are open, and we're going to be open about this.
What has been revealed:
non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity.
Is only part of the story.
The pressure's on. The Pentagon, the CIA, they're going to have to answer the mail.
Some are risking everything.
Have you had incidences that have caused you to be in fear for your life?
Yes, personally.
To uncover the rest.
What is being done to verify the assertion that the U.S. government has spaceships of non-human intelligence in their possession?
That kind of revelation unearths people's beliefs.
I would go to jail to say things that I've been exposed to in the program.
Here we go. All I can say is bravo.
I got to see that movie. That was incredible. My God, it had me on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, I know. So anyway, I want to thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure doing this show with you tonight.
Thank you for having me on.
And
it was good fun. We'll do it again.
I hope so.
Yeah.
And it's so nice to be here. And what a lovely place you have. And I'm so glad that things have worked out. You know, I know it's a tough thing to go through when all the work you put in, and then
getting ripped off.
Yeah, I didn't want to say that, but part, that part is really tough. But I hope
that was very tough. I'm not gonna lie, that was tough.
I hope you can just keep plowing ahead and get that behind you in the rearview mirror and keep doing what you're doing. We love what you do. I'm speaking for myself, but I'm also speaking for a lot of people, my listeners. We love what you do.
I think I got a couple films left in me.
Good. Glad to hear.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.